Welcome to Section 3 of 873. In this lecture, we will discuss regression with autocorrelated errors. We know that there are certain assumptions that need to be met in order to use the typical regression techniques for modeling. One of these assumptions is that the errors are independent of each other. This usually is not the case for time series data. Autocorrelated errors have some serious implications on our model. First, the regression coefficients are no longer minimum variance. Also, positively correlated errors usually yield an estimate for the variability that is underestimated. This can lead to incorrect decisions based on hypothesis tests or confidence intervals. There are ways to remedy this situation. The first is to add predictors that we may have missed. This will, of course, only work if there actually are predictors that are missing from the model. Another technique would be to use generalized least squares. This will only work if you had some idea of the autocorrelation structure. In most general cases, we would employ a model that will take the autocorrelation structure into account when fitting the model. Before we discuss those types of models, let's first talk about how you detect autocorrelation. First, one could see it in the residuals versus time plot. We would expect to see some sort of pattern on this plot. Which pattern to expect would depend on the type of autocorrelation. We would expect to see residuals with the same sign occur in clusters. If the signs of the residuals change rapidly, then the autocorrelation is negative. There is a test that we can run to detect autocorrelation. It is called the Durbin-Watson test. We assume that the errors are generated from a first-order autoregressive process at equally spaced time periods, denoted by the equation on the screen. This process is called autoregressive because the present error is a function of the error at the previous time period and some random shock at. Here are some of the details. We assume that the distribution of the random shocks is normal with mean 0 and some constant variance. Phi is the parameter of interest, and it defines the relationship between successive values of model errors at time t and time t1. We denote phi as the autocorrelation parameter. Based on the equation for the errors, in order for the present error to be a function of a fraction of the error at the previous time period, we need phi in absolute value to be less than 1. Earlier, we denoted at as a random shock. It is defined as a disturbance that is unique to the current time period. We think of the random shocks in similar manner that we think of the error terms in your typical regression model. The regression model with autoregressive errors is just a first-order linear model with the autoregressive equation for the errors substituted in. Notice that this means that we have an additional parameter to estimate, which is the autoregressive parameter. At this point, we should also note that xt and yt are the observation and predictor value respectively at time period t. If we substitute the error at time t into the autoregressive equation for the errors, we get the equation for the error at time t that you see on the slide. Notice that this means that the error term in the regression model for period t is just a linear combination of all of the current and previous realizations of the random shock at. Here are some details for the relationship on the previous equation. First, the expected value is 0. This should not surprise you since the only terms in this equation that is a random variable are the random shocks. We saw earlier that the expected value for that distribution is 0. The variance and covariances in this case are more complicated because we have lost the independence assumption. The lag between two errors that are one period apart is just ratio that you see on the screen. Notice that everything cancels except the autocorrelation parameter. This means that the autocorrelation function for time periods that are one period apart is just the autocorrelation parameter itself. In fact, the autocorrelation between any two errors is based on the k, which is the size of the lag. Notice that when the autocorrelation parameter is positive, the errors are positively autocorrelated since phi caret k power will always be positive. The magnitudes of the autocorrelation will get smaller as the lag increases. As k goes to infinity, the autocorrelation goes to 0. Based on what we have seen so far, we would expect the errors to be uncorrelated when the autocorrelation parameter is 0. The Durbin-Watson test is indeed a test, so we need to set up the hypotheses that we will be testing. We would like the null hypothesis to be an indication that the errors are independent, so we set this up to be phi equal to 0. The alternative in this case is that phi is positive. Notice that this means that we are trying to conclude that the errors are positively autocorrelated. Here is our test statistic. Notice that we can just use the lag1 autocorrelation to calculate D. Here are some of the details for this test. Here are basically trying to see how far from 2 the test statistic must fall to reject the null hypothesis. This is because if the test statistic equaled 2, then the observed lag1 autocorrelation would be 0. This number is quite hard to obtain since the distribution for the test statistic is dependent on your model matrix. Here are the rules that we use to make our decision. The values for DL and DO can be found in table A.5 in the back of your book. These are dependent on sample size, number of predictors, and type I error rates. It was stated earlier that the test is one-sided, assuming that we would like to show positive autocorrelation. This is because it is much more common than negative autocorrelation. If you are concerned about negative autocorrelation, we change the test statistic to 4D and the alternative changes. We could also just create a two-sided test. In this case, we would run both of the one-sided tests. We need to be aware that the error rate here will be twice as large. So you should adjust your type I error rate to cover both tests. Here is example 3.14 from your book. An analyst would like to predict the market share for a type of toothpaste based on selling price per pound. Let's try to fit the model and check for autocorrelation. Here is the data for 20 time periods. Here are the results of the simple linear regression model with price as the predictor. Notice that the DW stat is 1.13. We would need to check this against the values in the table. Another thing to note is the residual versus time plot. You can see that we do have some clustering of like sign residuals. Let's run the test. We see that the DW statistic is indeed less than the lower bound. This is an indication that we do have positive autocorrelation. Now that we have determined that there is some sort of dependency in the errors, we will still need to create a useful model. We have 2 different methods that we can use to fit a model taking into account the autocorrelation. These are the Kochari-Norkut and maximum likelihood methods. First, we will discuss the Kochari-Norkut method. This is one by which we transform the response as you see on the screen. This in itself is an autoregressive process. To simplify things, we will substitute the simple linear regression equations for the response at time t and t1, respectively, to get what you see on the screen. Notice that we have grouped the terms that don't include the predictors and called in beta 0 prime. We did the same thing with the terms that do include x and called them x prime. You should also notice that both terms include a phi. Also, notice that our new error terms are just the random shocks. These random shocks are independent, and since phi must be estimated, the model is no longer linear in its parameters. Now, how do we estimate phi? First, we find the residuals by regressing y on x. Now create a column for the one step behind residuals. Now regress the present time residuals on the one step behind residuals. Finally, phi is the slope term for this regression. Once we determine the estimate for phi, we use it to find the transformed observations and predictor variables. Next, we just fit the model. Here is the procedure. We first estimate phi. Then we find the transformed variables. Now the model is fit in the transformed variables and the DW test is run. If everything is okay, proceed to prediction, etc. If not, restart the process with the transformed variables and continue until the autocorrelation is taken care of. The other approach is the maximum likelihood approach. This method does have an advantage over the other method since it can be used in situation where the autocorrelation structure is more complex than first-order autoregressive. Just like all ML techniques, we will find the likelihood function and maximize it with respect to the parameters of interest. Luckily for us, this procedure is implemented in SAS. Redo example 3.14 using SAS with proc autoreg. Here are the commands to get the data read into SAS in a file called tooth. Then we have the statements for autoreg. Notice in the model statement, we are telling SAS to perform the DW test. We are also telling it to fit a model with the error structure first-order autoregressive. That is done with the lag command. The code on this slide will create the residual plots for the model. Here is the initial output. This is for least squares only. Notice we again get the same value for the DW stat as we did in the other case. Here is the model fit using the ML method. Phi is estimated and the fit statistics are given. Notice the value for the DW test. It is much closer to 2 this time. By running the code, you should see that the residual plots look fine. Also, the DW test yields no independence issue. Assuming that the errors are first-order autoregressive seems to have taken care of the problem. Once we have fit a useful model, we now will wish to forecast. In order to do this, we will need to find the forecast at times t plus k. So the formula for the forecast at the next time period, t plus 1, is given on the slide. The one-step ahead forecast error is just the difference between the response at time t plus 1 and the fitted value at time t. You should be able to convince yourself that this is just the random shock at time t plus 1. The variance of the random shock at any time t is constant. This means that the variance of the one-step ahead forecast error is the variance of the random shocks. So this leads to a lead 1 prediction interval as you see on the screen. The principles for the one-step ahead prediction interval can be extended to 2 steps ahead. The 2-step ahead forecast and forecast error is given on the slide. Notice that both the forecast and its error is a function of phi. Now, based on the 2-step ahead forecast error, the variance of the 2-step ahead forecast error is given on the slide. This also leads to the prediction interval. Now this idea can be extended to the tau-step ahead forecast. The tau-step ahead forecast and its error is given on the slide. Notice once again these are heavily dependent on phi. Also, notice in the forecast error as we get farther from time t plus tau, the random shock at that time has less effect on the forecast error itself. This is what we would expect. So it follows that the variance of the tau-step ahead forecast error is given on the slide. The prediction interval for the tau-step ahead forecast is given on the slide. Now let's go back to the tooth example. Assuming that the next price is 0.7, let's find the 95% prediction interval for this situation. So tau in this case is 1 and we can plug into the formula for the forecast when tau equals 1. In this case, we will get 3.517. Now we can plug into the equation for the prediction interval. We also need to find the critical point, which in this case is 1.96. After calculating the results, we get the interval on the screen. How this is interpreted in terms of short interval or anything like that is based on knowledge of the process. At this point, you would need to contact process experts. Some alternative models for first-order autoregressive errors have been suggested. The first one is given on the slide. Can you see the advantage here? Here is the second alternative. We need a way to figure out which model we should use. The decision should be made based on the data. So we will fit both models and choose the better model based on the fit and variability. Fit the alternative models using the tooth data and find the prediction interval for the next time period given that the price is again 0.70. On the slide are the values for price at time t and share and price at time t1. How did we come up with these values? Here are the results. Notice some things that are in bold. The p-value for x at time t1 is not significant. Also that RSQ, ADJ, and RSQ pred are both quite high and the DW stat is close to 2. So what should the next step be? Assuming that we have checked residuals, the 95% PI is found. We should note that the first alternative model fits and no autocorrelation exists. Also, the model seems to predict well. Let's try fitting the other model. Based on the fact that the partial F for the lag price is not significant, we should probably expect a good fit for the second model. This model again has a high RSQ, ADJ, and RSQ, pred. These are roughly the same as in the first model. The DW statistic is somewhat smaller, but still not enough to conclude the presence of autocorrelation. Once again, assuming that the residual analysis is fine, we find the prediction interval. It does seem to be shifter somewhat as compared to the other interval, but it is very minor. Based on the above, both models seem to fit well. We could probably choose either one, but because of parsimony, we would probably choose model 2. Next time, we will talk about time series regression.